everyone. Welcome to Erin Yang's presentation on building an expansive career. We're really excited to have Erin here with us. She has a variety of experiences, beginning in Stanford, working in product, sales, engineering, consulting, and venture capital. She's currently the vice president and chief technologist at Workday Solutions. We are really excited to have her. I don't want to take any more time up. Erin, I'm so honored and excited to introduce you today.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, I am super excited to be presenting to you all today, particularly because I have a 7-week-old at home, and it's been a while since I've gotten to have like professional and adult conversations with people. But I'll try to keep the baby talk down. But, you know, in some ways, this is perfect timing because I actually always find myself thinking deep thoughts about my career when I'm on maternity leave. This is actually my 3rd one. And I know for many of you, you're all trying to figure out where you're trying to go in your careers, both as a next step and long-term, what the destination is. And so I'm hopeful that I can share some things from my own experience that you can take along in your path forward. So, now, in the past, and even today, you probably hear a lot of comments around career ladders and, you know, how do you follow that ladder upward? How do you move up in an organization? Because, you know, that was the status quo. It was following a corporate ladder in a single company. I still remember when I had my first job out of college and I called my grandma and told her about it. Her first question to me was, is there a pension? And I was like, I think I've heard of that, but I need to Google it to see what that actually means. Because, you know, the concept of a career journey and a career path has just changed so much over time. Today, it feels to me, at least, a little bit more like this, where it's a bit more maze-like. You know, there's constant change. It's unclear both, you know, what can be a long-term career goal and even how to get there. But even though it's not as straightforward, I actually have found that there's even more opportunity to create a career that you love and have a variety of experiences. And so today I'll share a little bit about my own experience and some advice that I'm hopeful that each of you can take on in order to build your own expansive career. And so I know some of you have already gone in the app and filled out the poll, but I'd love to do a quick poll just to get a sense of who's all joined us here today. And so I believe it'll be on the right side of your screen, or if you're in the app, there's, if you come out of the full screen mode, there's like a poll tab that you can go into to just answer what stage you're at in your career. So we'll pause for just a minute for folks to fill that in. And if you see me looking down, it's because I'm in the app too, and I'm gonna see what your responses are. All right, lots of good engagement there. So it seems like, you know, if the numbers don't change too much, we've got over half of the folks in here who consider themselves mid-career, maybe a quarter to a third who are early stage, and then a minority that are in the late stage group. So that's great. We've got a good mix, and I consider myself kind of in the mid-career stage as well. So I'll share kind of what I've experienced and some of the tips that I think are useful even earlier in your career. So just to give you a little bit of context about me so that the examples I share make sense kind of on an entire timeline. You know, my quick background is that I think of my background as somewhat stereotypical. Born and raised in California to immigrant parents from Taiwan, grew up in Silicon Valley to an engineer dad, a librarian mom, always liked math and science, which, you know, grew into computer science and engineering as I got older. I really like structure, like rules. I loved standardized tests when I was younger. Anything that's well-defined that I could study and beat, which, you know, worked well enough to get me to Stanford University, where I majored in electrical engineering, because it was the hardest major that I found. And so, you know, don't be tricked by this visual. It kind of looks like it's ups and downs in my career, but it's not. Just it was a default kind of thing to put into Google Slides. But, you know, leaving college, because I love structure and having a plan, it was really the first time that I didn't have a super clear destination or a plan of how I was going to get there. Obviously I'd majored in electrical engineering, but when I looked at the jobs that were listed, none of them looked that interesting, actually. And at the time, a lot of my friends were getting into product management, which I thought was a really interesting concept in theory. Obviously, I didn't have any.
Hey everyone, it sounds like we lost Erin for just a minute there. In the meantime, if you'd want to join the poll or think of any questions you have for her, we know she'll be back in just a minute. I know you guys don't want to hear me speak, so I'm gonna stop.
Yes, we do. Hi, everybody. This is Deanna Costaraju. I work for the Women Transforming Technology Conference. We're going to get her back online here directly. I see she's already coming back on. So just bear with us. The internet is a crazy place.
Yeah, she'll be back any minute. And it'll give us some time to get even more excited about hearing.
That's right. So if you haven't already, you can, I see there's quite a few of you, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, as well as before you leave, we would love for you to rate the session. Of course, not this part, but the rest of the session, you can click the rate session button. And if you leave your email address, you'll be eligible for some very cool prizes. So we hope that you do that.
Yes.
Looks like Erin's trying to come on. There she comes. There we go. All right, Rachel, you might want to.
I am tethered to my phone now because my Wi-Fi decided to disconnect from the internet. Let me reshare my screen real quick. Yep, just got a text from my husband that the internet died. Perfect timing. Okay, let's get back to it. So I think I was somewhere in my journey of going to Accenture, which I had chanced upon during a Society of Women Engineers meeting, which was to me an interesting group of a pretty small group within a larger company where you get a mix of in-house projects where you actually program, but also external consulting opportunities, which I loved. But I realized that I loved part of things. So then I got to find a job that had the product design or engineering related role at a company that was focused on building. So I looked really at software companies. Those of you who've been in consulting may know that in the Silicon Valley, it's a bit tricky to transition to a software company or a product role, but a company called Circle of Moms took a chance on me when I met them at a Stanford job fair and created this role called a marketing and analytics engineer role, where I was actually writing code, but got to do a little bit of marketing and product management as well. I applied to Workday through a friend when I left Accenture, actually, but they called me back when I was already at Circle of Moms. I actually applied as a designer and a UI engineer because I didn't think I had the experience to be a product manager yet, but they actually reached out to me with a product management role. And at Workday is where I'd say I really got lucky and my career skyrocketed along with the company's growth at the time. And so within 2 years, I was leading our technology product management group. That group grew from about 10 to 70 product managers while I was leading it for over 4 years. Once the problem started feeling somewhat similar, and I wanted to get more of a GM-like experience with product marketing and sales and go-to-market, I took a different role called Workday Cloud Platform, where I got to lead product, engineering, sales, go to market at different points over the next couple of years. And then most recently, I have transitioned to Workday Ventures, where I've now been in venture capital for just over a year. So obviously everyone's career path is going to be unique. Maybe you heard some themes that you can relate to, maybe you didn't. Some of you are earlier in your career and many of you have more experience than I have as well. But here are some key things that I learned that I think can apply to anyone. And I will dive into each of these with some more specific examples. But first, step outside of your comfort zone. Next, be very intentional in your mindset and in what you're asking for. And finally, be open to surprises and changes. You've all probably been in tech long enough to have experienced some of these surprises. So that's probably not super new to you. So just to jump into it, stepping outside of your comfort zone, I often have this voice in my head that, when I look at new roles or when I think about what's next, I think, well, I'm not sure I'm qualified for this role. And I would really encourage you to think of that voice as a positive thing. It means you're headed in the right direction. I know there's another session on imposter syndrome, which really ties into this very much. But I would say turn it on its head to be something positive. Because first of all, you're more qualified than you think. You've probably heard the research done that says men apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications, but women apply only when they meet 100% of them. And I do think, like, pattern-wise, that tends to be true. The way I look at it means that, even if I think I'm not that qualified, others aren't that qualified either, so I should just go for it. And more importantly, what that means is that there's a huge opportunity to learn something new, because it's something that you don't know yet, and you're going to get the chance to learn in this new opportunity. And for me, I each time I took on a role that I felt vastly underqualified for, which I would say was the majority of the roles I've taken on lately, once you overcome them and be successful, it makes you just that much more confident in taking on that next and new role. When I took on the role at Circle of Moms, I went to a pure engineering role. I was reporting to the CTO. I was literally crying my first day on the job in the bathroom, hiding in the bathroom crying, because my programming skills weren't awesome. And they had this tradition that every programmer had to check in code on the first day. And it was just a lot of pressure, but it pushed me to work harder. And I ended up, really enjoying and loving my time and learning so much from just 9 months in that role at that company. I felt that also when I took on that technology product management role where, for 2 years, I was just, a product manager on the team. And then pretty suddenly I was promoted to manage the team of 10 product managers, most of whom had way more experience than I did. And I asked my boss, if he was crazy when he told me that was the plan, because I just felt totally unqualified for it. But, I was very fortunate to have him there just talking me through it and really encouraging me. And I ended up being able to take it on and felt like I gained so much confidence in myself after taking on that challenge. The second item I'd say is look horizontally. And, we talked about the career ladder. I don't like that metaphor because it implies you can only go up and down. I actually think that you can gain so much experience going horizontally between different functions. And, getting that real hands-on experience in different functions serves two really positive purposes. One is that, especially early in your career, you don't really know what different roles do. And to actually get hands-on experience doing something very different than what you did before helps you identify, do I like this or do I not? And do I want to continue to pursue this other function or do I not? And the other thing that it does is, it gives you broader experience that if you want to be a GM or a C-suite executive in the future, it gives you that broad experience that provides empathy, helps you be able to manage a team who does that function in the future, just gives you that broader set of experience. And actually, in hindsight, I wish I had done that earlier. I mentioned that Workday Cloud Platform role. One of the roles I took on was actually managing our first salespeople. They directly reported to me, literally getting texts from our account executive multiple times a day, sitting on sales negotiation calls, and just really was able to see firsthand what are the challenging parts of the contract we had written up for a salesperson to be able to get the contract across the line. And I was able to build so much more empathy. And I kind of wish that I had gotten that chance earlier in my career to have the hands-on experience instead of just managing it and experience it through others. So I think this is something that you can really do earlier on in your career as well. And then the third item, definitely, I think early in your career is a great time to do, but also anytime in your career, which is to build relationships, particularly cross-functionally. I think it's great early in your career because you tend to have a little bit more time. If you want to do social events, you're sort of at the same level as everyone else, and you're all going to be growing into it, bigger roles as you go forward. And so seek out projects, cross-functional projects, events where you get to meet people of different functions, especially if it's a more casual environment and you can really get to know them. I am a big introvert, and so, I got pushed into some of these events until I saw the value of them. And then I was pushing myself to go to these events because it's just a great opportunity to meet people, get to know what is the work they do in a non-pressure environment. Because in the future, you may need to ask a favor of these people, and trust is really best built when you've built that relationship before you actually needed that person. One quick example is, I think the first or second week I joined Workday, because I lived in San Francisco and there's a small group of people who live there as well, I got invited to this laser tag event that they had planned. And they didn't even have a spot for me on the team. They're like, oh, you can come as the team photographer, which I thought was kind of strange, but I went anyway. And I got to know a bunch of people from our consulting organization. And 7 years later, when I was leading Workday Cloud Platform and we really needed buy-in from our consulting group, one of the people that I had met at that laser tag event was critical for us to get, a successful product deployed at our customer sites. And so, like I said, it's much easier to call on those favors when you've established a relationship, when there was no sort of business pressure on it. The second major area is bringing an intentional mindset. And I know Emily mentioned this several times this morning if you joined the keynote, which is every time you make a career move, bring that intentional mindset for each move you make and for a move that you may not make. Obviously don't plan too far out. I love to plan, but I've, held myself back a bit, thinking about the next role that you're going to take. What do you want to get out of that next experience? And is it generally taking you in the direction that you want? You heard it from Emily this morning. I thought it was a great example of it's really easy to get caught up by the next shiny thing, a company that's been in the press a lot, or maybe just, someone there and it's easy. But really think clearly about what exactly you want to get out of that role. When you've completed that role, if you've moved on from that role, what do you want to have accomplished? And one tip that I got that I love, being kind of a structured thinker, is thinking of how a LinkedIn profile is set up. There's all these different sections: connections, skills, experiences, recommendations. When you're done with this next role, what do you want to have added to this profile? Is it a specific new skill? Is it a particular experience that you want to be able to put on your profile? Is it increasing the number of connections that you have? For myself, in this last role in venture capital, a big piece of it was, primarily skills, but also building more external connections, because I've spent, 8 years in very internal facing roles within Workday. And so thinking about that and then matching the opportunity that you're getting to the role and making sure that you're actually achieving what you want or have the opportunity to achieve what you want. The next thing is being proactive about asking. And Emily mentioned this as well, which I thought was great. Talk and tell people exactly what you're looking for, because as you know, many of the great positions never make it all the way to being posted anywhere, because someone's will have pulled someone in from their network, or it's already been filled before it even made it to the job board. And so by telling my mentors, my close peers, my friends that I was specifically looking for a particular type of role, I got to have my name in early as soon as they started thinking about a particular new role. Let your network work for you, because you don't have to be the only one looking for that role. And be really specific about how you share. Don't just say, I'm looking for something new, something different, because everyone's busy and they don't necessarily have time to parse what that particularly means. I have a executive talent recruiter that I had spoke to once who had some great tips, which was, one, no one has time to read your resume. And so literally she's like, just send me 5 bullet points that summarize your biggest strengths and accomplishments that tie to the particular role that you're looking for. So think of how you can summarize your experiences and the transferable skills into 5 bullet points that you could send to anyone, send to a friend to forward on to their friends. And also write a few bullet points on what you're looking for, what type of role, the stage of the company, location, anything like that. My example is when I took on that Workday Cloud Platform role, which actually happened after my first maternity leave and a lot of thought about what challenges I wanted next. It was very intentional. I had felt at that point that I spent 4 years learning how to grow a team. So a lot of the organizational challenges and growth and, figuring out how to run planning and prioritization across a really large organization. But for me, what was missing was, well, I want to take a product to market and, a product that customers pay for versus more of, the background technology. And so I went and I told, my boss, I had a very close relationship with my boss, so it wasn't scary to tell my boss, but tell my boss, mentors, sponsors, I really would like to get experience that has more exposure to product marketing, go-to-market strategy, to sales. And this Workday Cloud Platform role, they started talking about organizing it separately. And actually one of my mentors got picked to be the GM for that group. And he pulled me in immediately before anyone even knew that organization was going to be created. And so, being intentional and very proactive about asking is really important. And finally, don't overplan. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what tech's going to be hot in 5 years. And so that leads into the last major takeaway, which is being open to surprises and changes. Obviously, technology is always changing, so your best laid plans often go awry. It's really easy to get down about a change that happens. But try to think about what you can learn and what stories you could tell your future employers about what you learned and how resilient you were able to be. One of my favorite things to dig into when I interview is, what was the problem that you ran into and how did you approach it? I'd much rather hear a really challenging story there than have someone who had the perfect resume on my team. I'll go back into sort of that transition from, well, 2 examples. One was when I moved out of the role leading the technology product management team. That was something where, we actually reorganized my entire team. And it was because at the time, it was very clear the company was moving toward this more GM-like structure where product and engineering got organized together. And I could have held on and tried to keep that role, leading a large team of product managers. But to me, it was, the writing was on the wall that was going to happen in the next couple of years. So why don't I take charge and have more influence on how to model that new organization, and then also put my name forward for some interesting new roles. And now I also have firsthand experience about how different org models can, the pros and cons of different org models and that I can take with me in the future. It was also, moving from Workday Cloud Platform over to Workday Ventures was not part of my original plan. I actually had, in my head, I was like, well, I should take the product to general availability and then I'll think about what's next. But about 6 months prior to that, there were some massive reorgs. My role was changed. So I had the opportunity to either continue with the change role, be upset and leave the company, or look for a new opportunity. And that's when I had several mentors, including our CEO, mention the, accidentally hit a button. mentioned the Workday Ventures as an opportunity, which I didn't think, actually I have a husband in venture capital, so I didn't think that that was right for me at the time, but I had multiple conversations. After those conversations, I saw so many positives of, getting to work more on the strategic side, to understand higher level business strategy, learn about different markets. And like I mentioned, building a lot of external connections when that was something I had sort of not spent time on the last almost decade. And so in hindsight, that was the best decision that I could have made for both my family with the pandemic that hit and my career. And so one of the pieces of advice I would say related to that is really think about how you want the story told about each move that you make in your career, and tell that story early, because people will repeat it. Don't let others define what that story is, because you all know people love to speculate, and it can have, it can easily turn into a negative story if you're not there telling the positive story that you want to have told. And so take charge of your story, literally write it down, write down the key points, repeat it, and use it with your friends, your colleagues, and in the future as you interview for new roles. And so just to summarize, really the 3 key areas are just stepping outside of your comfort zone, because that's how you're going to get opportunities to learn. Bringing an intentional mindset, because, think about what the specific skills and experiences are that you want to build, and tell people what you're looking for, because that will surface opportunities you don't know about. And be open to surprises and changes, because these are inevitably going to come. Look for the positives and tell that story. And by doing these things, you set yourself up for having a variety of experiences and finding roles in a journey that is expansive, engaging, and something that you hopefully love. And I think we only have a couple minutes. I apologize for the technical issue that we had before. Rachel, did you want to go through questions?
Erin, you did so great. You did answer a few of them that I saw come through. We're hearing that people reach out, ping with any more questions that they have. We have the next session coming up in just a minute. So Erin, thank you so much. That was amazing. I really appreciate all your time, and it was really enjoyable. We have a lot of good takeaways, I think.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you do rate the session before you go. And thank you all for your time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple minutes.
Yeah, see you.